How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Terror Talk. Guys, we are going to visit the case again of Laken Snelling, 21-year-old University of Kentucky athlete who was arrested on August 31st, 2025 after police found a dead male infant in her closet following a call about an unresponsive infant at a home on Park Avenue in Lexington on August 27th. I believe she was taken into headquarters on the 27th, but officially arrested on August 31st, and then she went to court for an arraignment, which I think was September 2nd, in which she wound up pleading not guilty to abuse of a corpse, tampering with physical evidence, and concealing the birth of an infant. Now, granted, when she was, I believe, brought to headquarters, she did admit guilt at first to giving, she admitted guilt, but it was to giving birth to the baby and then concealing or cleaning up. But then obviously, lawyers and stuff. So then she changed the plea to being not guilty. And that's where we stand right now. And the baby was found, again, in her closet in a garbage bag wrapped in a towel. Now, right now, she has been released on bond, no ankle monitor, none of that. But it was a $100,000 bond, and she's back in Tennessee with her family. She's no longer a University of Kentucky student. She withdrew. And then right now we're still trying to find out an autopsy. What's the cause of death for the baby? Was it a stillborn, miscarriage, or was the baby alive? And she unfortunately killed the baby. So waiting on the autopsy results right now. The cause of death remains inconclusive with extensive microscopic analysis still needed. And a little bit more about her. She was a member of the University of Kentucky stunt team and competed in the collegiate national championship months before her arrest. And now we're waiting for her preliminary hearing, which is scheduled September 26th at 8:30 a.m. There are some updates also. We're trying to find out who the father is. A lot of people believe it's this gentleman here, Isaiah Hall. That's Snelling's ex-boyfriend, a 21-year-old quarterback at Cumberland University, already provided his DNA sample to police. So he's moving things forward. His father, Justin Smith, confirmed that Lexington police had him come down to the station to give a sample. But they also believe that she was currently dating. He's the more recent boyfriend. There he is, Jordan Connor. He's a 24-year-old former varsity basketball player who Snelling was dating more recently. They had professional photo shoots together months before the arrest. And we'll get to that because there's a little bit of some confusion here, whether she knew she was pregnant or she didn't. There's some photos on the internet that people think are maternity photos between him and her. Again, there's Laken and Jordan. What is it? My mind's going blank. Jordan Connor. And as you can see in the photos, a lot of people think these are maternity photos. And then unique thing about him, where you had Isaiah Hall volunteering to give his things, to keep things moving, maybe to remove his name or just where do I stand in all this? Jordan Connor actually decided to delete his social media page and maybe disconnect from her entirely. And we're going to probably discuss that a little more in today's dialogue. So again, real quick, the DNA testing, we talked, Hall has already provided his DNA sample, and there he is again with her as requested. And then Connor, as of yet, don't look like he has given his DNA. But again, that's a filming today. Who knows? Updates come rather quick. And again, testing is to establish paternity and make sure it matches the baby boy that was found deceased in the closet. So the timeline suggests Snelling had relationships with both men, with Hall being the earlier relationship and Connor being the more recent. And then DNA results have not been publicly released. Now, remember, guys, I did a show on this a couple of days ago with a mental health counselor by the name of Denise Schoenwald. We didn't have a lot of information, especially a new update that came today that we're going to be talking about, which basically makes me want to shift the narrative a little bit because we were very objective in our last dialogue, and you guys got to check it out. It's really good. Very detailed discussion with Denise Schoenwald about, this case about Laken Snelling. But we had to make an update. So I had to do a disclaimer at the very beginning because there was an update in how there was notification about the baby that was deceased in the closet. And at that point, we thought anybody could have made the call, including Laken. That could have been a sign of remorse. But it's been pretty much proven that she's not the one that made the call. That basically the call came in at 10:35 a.m. on August 27th. I'll give you exactly what was said on that call. It was complainant just found a dead baby in a closet and it's cold to the touch. That's from the dispatch report. And then eventually fire department came, police came, found the baby, but Laken was not on site. Laken eventually came to scene later on. And that's where the police took her in for, I guess, some questioning. That's where she originally admitted guilt. This is somewhere between like 4 or 5 in the afternoon where they finally bring her in. I think it was like 4:58 was the time I saw, and that's on August 27th. She did admit to giving birth to the baby. She did admit to trying to conceal and clean it up. And then on August 31st, that's when she was arrested, charged. And then, as I said before, September 2nd was the arraignment. They have not charged for murder yet or manslaughter because they don't know exactly how the baby died. Was it a stillborn? Was it a miscarriage? Or again, or was it she took measures in her own hand? But let me get Joe, because we have a lot to discuss here. So let me bring Lieutenant Joseph Pangaro on. What up, Joe?
Hey, how are you, Anthony?
Good. Hey, Joe, you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure, everybody. Lieutenant Joe Pangaro here. I spent most of my career in the investigative divisions of my agency. I love being a detective. I enjoy everything about it. I'm an author. I write for Blue 360 Media. I host my own podcast, the Blue Heart Webcast podcast. It's on YouTube. You can find it. I like to try and shed some light on these type of topics to help people understand what goes on in the process.
Yeah, now there's a big discussion here, Dave, because, guys, part of our discussion is going to be, a big part of our discussion is why didn't Laken Snelling seek prenatal care? And that matters because, I mean, do we have a case where there is a mother who was overwhelmed and panicked, or do we have premeditation? Did she want to hide the baby and basically not showcase that she was pregnant because eventually she was planning on getting rid of the baby? And this is what we're going to kind of discuss today. This is the questions I'm sure the prosecutors are going to ask. Why'd you give birth to the house? Why didn't you go to any doctor's appointments? Because I have reason to believe that she has not gone to a doctor appointment the whole time she was pregnant. Again, that's the information that's coming my way. And I'm not the only person that's getting that information. There are some people that believe she didn't know she was pregnant until when she gave birth. And I really do find that hard to believe, because when you look at photos of her, I mean, you can clearly see that she has a baby bump. But again, I'm being fair. Maybe she didn't know, and that could explain a lot. But again, that's a very convenient argument when someone's going to question why didn't you go to medical care? Because that could show you premeditated this, and the person goes back, well, I didn't know I was pregnant. So again, we'll get to that. But in the meantime, Joe, this case is a bit. There's just a lot going on. You would think that it's cut and dry, but it's really not, and it's also a very sensitive topic. There are a lot of people that see Laken Snelling as evil person who committed an evil act, and there are some people that want to know more. It's an evil act, but let's know more about her, because we don't know if she really is about vanity and all these other selfish interests, or did she truly commit an act that she was panicked, overwhelmed, and didn't know what to do, and unfortunately the situation got the best of her. Not minimizing what she's done, but there are people that do have compassion towards her situation because she's also young and may not have been aware that she was pregnant at the time. But Joe, what's your thoughts initially before we dive deep?
Well, I think in my career, I've come across this, and it's always that question that you have as the investigator when they tell you, I had no idea I was pregnant. And I'm not a woman. I don't know what it feels like. I can only anticipate that you would know, you would feel things. I know from my wife being pregnant, I remember there were physical changes, but there were also emotional changes, and she could feel changes in her body and the way her body functioned. But at the same time, I've come across these young women that actually really didn't understand the process, didn't know they were pregnant until the end. And I think it all has to come out in her statements, what she's going to make, what statement she's going to make, witnesses, people around her. You know, I would think she probably told somebody if she knew she was pregnant. So there might be somebody out there with more information.
And that's a good point, because whoever made that phone call could be part of it, or could be the one that noticed it by mistake and led the investigators to finding the baby. But again, you have to ask, right, Joe? How did you know to make this phone call? Were you a roommate that discovered the body, maybe, or maybe you're someone that saw her pregnant, all of a sudden the baby bump's gone? We have no idea who made the call and how did they find out, right? That's important, right? Correct?
Quite pertinent information as to who made that call and what do they know, when did they know it, and what involvement they had at all.
Yeah, guys, in our last dialogue I had with Denise Snowball, we covered a lot because we related to that call because we were filled with ambiguity. So we had heard different stories. So we even put that maybe she made the call because she felt guilty, and maybe she did what she did because of something in the last minute that happened with her and her boyfriend. And we came up with so many different scenarios that were trying to be as objective as possible, but we also painted a picture like we may paint a little bit more deeper today. But right now, the narrative is really not going in her favor. I mean, so there was, she does have a past history of kind of being a bully. I got some things I want to read here. There's a former classmate by the name of Sydney Kite that I saw a quote from her saying that Laken was obsessed with her appearance, very obsessed with being popular and fitting in. Laken had many, many people that she took her personal anger out on. My sister was one of them. While in high school, she tried to run over one of my closest friends with her Jeep. The bullying got so bad, my friend had to be pulled out of school and transferred to another because Laken had taken it so far. So again, you're getting a context now that's creating a picture that is kind of leaning us towards this may be a bad person who committed a bad act because of pretty much the sake of vanity. Are we starting to see that a little bit, Joe?
I think you're seeing a possibility of that. And that's one of the things that as part of an investigation, you're going to look into all of that. Here we have somebody who feels their sister was bullied. So it's not even firsthand. If this is what I saw and it was my sister, could that be real personality traits of this girl? Absolutely, it could. And that's something you'd have to look at. How does that transfer then to, did she do something purposeful? Did she do something accidental with this baby? That's where you're going to have to really look much, much closer. So a lot of times, and we all know, we watch the news, right? You see some story on the news about some kind of a criminal case, and everyone immediately jump, well, that's not how I would behave. That's not what I would do. I would have done this. And this is, we just don't know until you sit down with that person. You look at the forensic evidence. That's going to tell us a lot. And then you actually get to talk to her and find out, what did she know? What do the witnesses know about this and her behaviors? Then you can start to put that personality profile into a better focus.
Yeah, and even if she was this bully person, doesn't mean she can't have a bad moment.
Yeah,
and doesn't mean that she couldn't have been pressured. And but again, it's just it's tough because now the context is building. And to me, the strength of the argument here is that she left and came back. That to me is what really made me put the disclaimer on the show I did with Denise Snowball, because I try to be objective. And then right when the show was done, that was an update that she was not home, that she left and she came back. So someone else had made the call. And once I heard that as an update, I had to put the disclaimer in, because to me, that is a very defining picture of who this individual is. That she went out with the normal day. To me, it's just, I don't even know how you could even do that. I mean, obviously medically is one thing, but just mentally, you just put a baby in a fucking blanket in a garbage bag. And me and Joe have talked about this before. One of the things that me and Joe want to make sure the channel understands, and I'm going to do a show on it eventually, is remorse only comes, true remorse only comes after guilt. Something that you've done that you felt wrong about doing, and then the next step is how it affected the individual that was affected by the wrongdoing. At this point here, I definitely don't see remorse. So even when you see this girl with her head down, that's not remorse for ending her baby life if she did, or that's not remorse for covering it up and concealing it, or that's more of shame or regret. And shame or regret may not be partnered with guilt. Shame or regret could just be very selfish in nature. It could be that now she's caught, how she's going to be seen. She's no longer in the college anymore. Her life is going to change. Shame and regret does not have to always go towards guilt. Shame and regret can be internal based on the circumstances that she now has to personally deal with, as opposed to remorse. So I want people to look at this picture. And right now, I'm sorry, Laken, I have to say this. I don't see remorse anymore because now in context, the fact that you left and came back, head down, shameful, maybe head down, maybe regret, but they're going to be rooted in selfish reasons for me. Any thoughts on that, Joe? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it could be that. I mean, one of the things that I know from seeing people go through this process, as a law enforcement guy, an investigator, the only time I've ever been brought in and asked questions and put in the hot seat, so to speak, is when there was an internal affairs investigation, and they weren't about me, that kind of thing. But maybe I witnessed something, I saw something, whatever, and it's very uncomfortable. And when we look at people and how they're responding, it's very common to say, well, that's a person who had nothing to do with this wouldn't react like that. And many times that's true, but other times it's not. When you're talking about her walking around and looking down with shame or whatever, one of the things that I talk about in my book, The Interview, which is how to do a criminal interview, one of the things we find is people have to overcome obstacles to their ability to tell the truth, to their ability to get to the point that they can accept that they did something big, to get to shame, to get to grief, to get to remorse. They have to wrap their head around that they did something bad. And a survival mechanism often involves lots of things. What are they going to survive? I'm going to survive getting charged for this. What are my consequences? Now, again, if they're personal consequences, am I going to go to jail? Am I going to have all kinds of problems? What is my family and friends going to think? But what about the baby? Right. So she's doesn't look like she's thinking about the consequences for that baby. She didn't call it in. Apparently it was someone else. She did put the baby in a closet. This starts to flesh out, I think, some things that I would look at as an interviewer to try and figure out who this person is. And that's going to help you down the road determine the appropriate charges, if any, and that with all the forensics. So when I look at this, I say, is it starting to look like that? Yeah, it is. And there's an old saying out there, Anthony. It's Occam's razor, and I love saying that. It makes me sound smart. Occam's razor. What it means is when you have a bunch of choices, usually the simplest answer is the right one. So when we're looking at all of these personality reveals of her not showing remorse, not making the call, not being upset, not crying, it could very well be that she just didn't want to be involved in this baby and thought somehow or other she could get out from under by getting rid of it, and we won't know until we talk to her.
All right, Joe. So as we move forward, I want to talk about a little bit about why would a young woman avoid all medical care during pregnancy, especially one carrying a full term? Because when I did the first video, I was trying to be objective. I even crossed into maybe she didn't know, maybe no one knew. Maybe that was more about her not knowing, and maybe she really was someone who was confused and just got overwhelmed by the situation. But I really did find that harder to believe. And then when I was watching other people doing their shows and looking at what they're bringing to the forefront, it's like, yeah, that's pretty much may not be correct. Like, how could she not know, but also how could other people not know? Because in the end, you could clearly see it. Even if you didn't know this story, you would know the girl, especially in this picture here, had a bit of a baby bump. So for the intentional concealment, so she was concealing the fact that, let's say she knew. Now I'm going to put in, and it kind of touched on the other episode, but today as well. Let's say she knew. So now everything at this point right now is intentional concealment. And yes, intentional concealment would be not going to the doctor's office, not getting proper care because it's documented. So I don't want this to be documented. My plan at this point here is, I'm going to give birth, but no one's ever going to know this baby existed. This baby could be an obstacle to the life I want to live, to the stuff I'm trying to accomplish, to maybe I'm trying to, keep this guy in my life and he's got sports and everything going. He doesn't need a kid to complicate all this. And we've seen people do this, the relationship supersedes the child's life. So I have purposeful avoidance of doctors to hide the pregnancy from friends, families, or authorities. No medical visits equals no documentation, no intervention, no hospital trail. And then it does suggest premeditation, especially if paired with how the baby was hidden after birth. So it'll be very important for, obviously, the investigators to look in to see, hey, what's going up with these doctor's appointments? And also, why did you have birth in the house? And that will partner with how, in context, the concealment of the baby once the baby was born. So was the lack of care part of a broader plan to avoid consequences? So, Joe, first question to you. From an investigative perspective, does avoiding medical care look like, within the context we have here, including what happened after the baby was born, the concealment, the garbage bag, the cleaning supplies, the baby wrapped in a blanket? So does the care look like intentional concealment, almost like covering tracks? And how would detectives interpret that in terms of premeditation?
Okay, so you have a lot there to unpack. I think having that psychologist on was a good idea. What you talked about, because there's a couple things going on here for this young lady. If she found out that she was pregnant and she thought she was going to be with the guy forever, and maybe that was in her head, but then she realized, and I think you're right, that people start to look and say, well, how is this going to affect me? I'm going to be stuck with a child now. I don't want to be stuck with it. I'm not with the father anymore. It's going to be too difficult. So you have a couple of choices here. Either there was knowing activity on her part that she didn't know what to do about it, or she didn't know up until the point. Now, I saw that picture, and it looks like there's a baby bump there. It certainly does. But does that mean she knew she was pregnant? And again, it's hard to say. There's also the concept of denial. She's putting this off. No, I'm not really pregnant. I'm not really pregnant. Then, unfortunately, she can't get around the fact that she is. Now, one of the questions that I would say as the investigator, I would look at all of that to determine, when did you realize you were pregnant? Obviously, when she's in that room or wherever she was giving birth. We all know that there's going to be pains, there's going to be cramping, there's going to be all of that as the birth process begins to take place. When is that the first time she realized she was pregnant? Because we do hear about these young girls that go in and they're having stomach problems and they give birth on the toilet and they didn't even know they were pregnant. And these are granted younger girls usually, but was she in denial? How come and this is one of the things, Anthony, I think I would have to take apart with the conversation with her, is if she didn't want this child all along, saying she knew she was pregnant, that it would ruin her life, to go to the end of the pregnancy to give birth, to extinguish the child's life or not care for the child so that it expired, why didn't she just go get an abortion? Now, this is not an argument about abortion. If it's not available in Kentucky by law, she could have gone somewhere and gotten an abortion, and that would have ended the pregnancy. As soon as she found out, when she missed her first period, oh my gosh, I might be pregnant. You take a test and you find out, I don't want to be a mother. This will ruin my college career, the boyfriends, whatever it is. So where do I go and terminate this pregnancy? She could have done that, but she didn't. She gave birth to this child. So that brings it down to me as an investigator. Did she know? Or did she not know? That's the first thing we'd have to identify. Did she know she was pregnant? And for anyone going, there's no way you wouldn't know you're pregnant. I find it hard to believe myself, but at the same time, I have seen it where people really hung on as best as they could forever, that they really didn't know. Their parents didn't notice. She's a young, healthy girl. She's athletic. Some women put on, 10, 12 pounds during pregnancy. Some women put on 100 pounds. So that baby bump might have just been looking to people like she was putting on some weight. It could have been the positioning of the camera, the way she was bending. It could have been a lot of things. But that's the first thing I would have to identify, is where do I see her in this process? Did she know she was pregnant or didn't? If she did know she was pregnant, why did she wait to go to term? And again, we have to find out if the baby was actually term, or was it one of the other things that you discussed? Maybe it was she lost the baby. Maybe it was a miscarriage. Could have been other things. But that's where I'd start first. Did she know or didn't know? Because that's going to change my questioning. That's going to change the approach I take to this, to find out, did she just panic at the end and not know what to do? And the forensics are going to tell us what happened to that baby. Did she give birth to a live baby? And what happened to result in the baby's death? So these are difficult things, because you're dealing with these kind of emotions. Having a child, your life changing. These are young people. They make bad decisions. I'm not saying she's not a bad person and evil and did a very bad thing, but I don't know. This is where, as an investigator, I would start to look. Right? That's where I would start to break this down into different buckets and try and develop my investigative hypothesis based on what the evidence tells me, the forensics tells me, the statement she made, what her friends know. Then I'd be able to try and figure out which way was this going, and then where does it lead to charges or other outcomes.
Yeah, and guys, when we first look at her, you may see someone who's extremely confident. I mean, she's on social media all the time, putting herself on Front Street. But you also have to remember something with these individuals. And there she is, as we showed before, going through the arraignment. But they also live by approval of what the community expects of them to some extent. So a lot of them, they put the pictures up and people may think, oh, that's a secured individual, but it's not. It could be a very insecure individual. You could have a person that gets a million good comments, but the one negative comment is what they're going to focus on. And I think in this case here, it could be you got some level of vanity here, maybe some level of narcissism, but loaded with a lot of insecurity, because maybe what she thought was the baby could bring shame to my image. I am trying to showcase perfection, the Barbie doll, a young, successful athlete. This baby is not part of that plan. Now, granted, there are pictures that showcase later that she had goals of being a mother, and these pictures here, which people think are maternity pictures, but we don't know that yet. We don't know if the goals for being a mother in that one social media post was for the immediate or if it was for years down the line. So we don't know. But with that said, if we continue with the context we're at now, where this baby could have been an obstacle, and the reason why I'm thinking that is because she put the baby in the closet and went off, and then wind up coming back to the police being on the scene, and just they discovered what she had did. So when I got fear, shame, or social pressure to explore a little bit more, concerned about ruining her image as a student, athlete, or disappointing loved ones. Pregnancy may have symbolized failure in her social world. I got to put that out there. And she may have avoided care out of emotional paralysis and not malice. And that's because basically she just, I think at this point here, she just really had no want to keep the baby, because the social image in her mind could have been destroyed by having the baby. Maybe, who knows, maybe she did post these pictures up and didn't get the response she wanted. I mean, I don't know. But having said that, I do know initially when you see her, you're going to see someone that's very big into how they look, how they're perceived. And a lot of people may think that's security, but believe it or not, it could be insecurity, because you're constantly looking to validate yourself through social media and the likes and the comments. So, Joe, in your experience, how often? Oh, go ahead. You have a
no. I'm going to jump in there and say, when we look, and I don't mean to open this up to a bigger societal discussion, but we know in our society today, we do see, and I don't want to say all younger people, but we do see that there's a clear feeling out there that a child can be an obstruction to the life you want. And we see that people very sometimes cavalierly just end their pregnancies one after another, one after another, one after another. There's no value to that baby in lots of instances where the baby, an abortion, is simply a convenience to get rid of. And in other cases, it's not. So to me, I'd want to know, why did she go so far with this baby if she really just wanted to get rid of it? Now, that could be she didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to get an abortion. She didn't know what to tell the father. It could be all of those things that you said. She could be just this person who sees herself as, hey, I'm a perfect Barbie doll, and I'll handle this like I handle everything else. She could also be, she could have other ways of thinking that are not clear in other things. She can have all those pressures from family and friends, or she just was in denial of this, and that doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just, you see what I'm saying? To determine what questions you're going to ask, what you're going to pursue, that's the kind of things you have to iron out first, so that because you would ask totally different questions if you thought she knew and did this anyway. You would ask different questions if you thought she knew, but she was in denial. You would ask different questions if she didn't know. All of these things matter to find out what really happened here. What we do know is that there is a dead baby that shouldn't be dead unless it died naturally in the process of birth, or if it died before it was born as a stillborn or whatever, we don't know. But the reality is there's a child here who is dead. And if there is criminal culpability to that death, we have to get this right. And understanding all the personality traits of this person is going to help us make those determinations.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, would there have been more sympathy towards her if she would have called the police after the birth instead of putting the baby in a closet in a garbage bag, cleaning supplies, wrapped in a towel? And I want to mention something. Sometimes in cases like this, where you got someone just seeking validity, their strive for perfection based on how they're seen by others could wind up being the pressure they put on themselves, because they feel that they have to maintain this perfection. And unfortunately, like Joe said, not to make it a big social show here, but that is where we're at now. Sadly, it's like everybody lives for the one like, and it's funny. You can get 100 likes from the people that matter, but get one negative comment from someone who doesn't. It messes up your whole, the whole way you view yourself. It's such a bastardized. There's like no thick skin anymore, and it makes sense to me, actually, if you think about it, because you could have someone here who's very surface level. That's why she's able to do what she does, including what she did with the baby. I mean, and there is no depth to her. So therefore, she wouldn't understand deeper level thinking. Just anything that affects the surface, it could crack her. Now, Joe, I had a question here for this part was, so in your experience, how often do investigators see shame or fear as the real motivator behind concealment? And how do you separate that from criminal intent? Because I want to add something to this. A lot of people were mentioning that she wrapped the baby in a towel. Okay, I get it. And a lot of people believe that the wrapping of the baby in a towel maybe is a sign of remorse. But I have a couple of thoughts here on that I want to add real quick. So there are some mechanisms psychologically that could be the reason why a mother would do this. After she hurts the child, why would she wrap the baby up in a towel? So one, you have cognitive dissonance. Wrapping the infant helps the mother maintain the illusion of care despite the reality. Then you have denial or disassociation, treating the baby as sleeping rather than deceased. The maternal instinct is still there, persistent. So you have the automatic caregiving impulse, even in crisis. Then you have the guilt management, acts as a symbolic gesture to reduce guilt. Or then you have the preservation of dignity, maintains the infant's dignity and the mother's self-image. The clinical context behind this is often occurs in neonaticide. My word, are really bad at doing words, but neonaticide. So obviously the death of an infant within 24 hours of birth, linked to denial of pregnancy or concealed pregnancy, suggests conflicted emotions rather than premeditated violence, or considered significant in forensic psychology because it reflects complexity, not cold calculation. Sadly, for this, I think the towel could have been part of the cleanup, and all she did was just put everything together into the bag. I have a feeling it has nothing to do with any of what I just said. But Joe, I have some stuff from a detective's point of view. Detectives may interpret wrapping as staging or concealment, an attempt to control how the body's found. Could be seen as consciousness of guilt. The suspect knows death occurred and chooses to handle the baby, chooses to handle the body. Raises investigative questions. Did she intend to hide evidence, delay discovery, or soften the scene for those who would find the child? I think part of what we said falls into that. In interviews, detectives look for whether wrapping was done out of panic, ritual, or strategy, or for prosecutors, the act can be argued both ways, either a sign of conflicted emotions, that would be a defense, or proof of deliberate handling of a corpse. That's the prosecution. So, Joe, when you see a suspect wrapped an infant in a blanket or a towel, whatever it is, does that lean more towards emotional panic, or does it suggest a deliberate attempt to manage the crime scene? And in context of what Laken said, I believe it's the latter, but what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I'm going to connect the first thing that you said. Can shame and fear and all of that lead to, or is it criminality? I think shame of being pregnant, all those things, it's going to ruin my life. My family's going to be upset. That can certainly take place. And then as the reality of this baby coming, that can develop into what do I do? And you and I might not think like this, but people I know, I've dealt with these people, they get to the point, well, if I have to get rid of the baby. So if I don't have the baby, then my problem goes away. And I can move on. So I think the shame and all that can build and lead to criminality, which has happened in many cases where they kill the baby as soon as it's born. But in looking at this, when I say, okay, what's down the road, wrapping this baby, I think you hit on something, Anthony, right off the bat, immediately. We know childbirth is messy to begin with, physically messy. There are body fluids, there is blood, there's all this, that, and the other thing. Going into that, having been around for the birth of 4 of my children, we know that there's that the water breaks. Now that can happen hours before the actual birth. Who knows what happened there, when that took place? Was there anybody in? Was she suffering through this on her own? And then she'd get the towel. Did she use that to clean up herself? And then when the baby was born, what do I do with it? You start to, and you onto something here. Wrapping that baby, because it is now deceased, however it got deceased, that's another story. Wrapping that baby can be an act of compassion for that child and decency. And it's a baby, so I'm going to wrap it in the towel. If she had just taken it and put it in a garbage bag, that would tell me something different about the psychology of the person. I'm going to think you're right, and that the towel was initially part of a cleanup, and then once she had the baby there, what do you do with a dead baby? You know, what do you do now that you have this child? Which leads me into the next thing that I'm thinking in this process, and I don't want to jump ahead, but I think it all matches. You know, if she had the child wrapped up, now I have to get rid of it, so she puts it in a plastic bag so the baby's not leaking all over the floor, making a bigger mess that she has to then conceal again. But the reality is, what was she thinking? How long did she think she would leave a dead baby in the closet? That she wouldn't try to remove it right away, put it in a suitcase, walk out the back door, take some shopping back, do something. Why would you not remove that baby right away? That can speak to her psychologically. She could be in shock. She could be in denial that this just happened. She just gave birth. It's physically challenging to give birth. It could have been a difficult birth. It could have been all kinds of things going on with her. But I think wrapping the baby in the towel was part of probably the cleanup. And then at some point, unless you're saying this person is a demon, you would wrap the child. It's still a baby. It would look like a baby. So you'd wrap it up and then put it in the bag. That's what I would think. That would be my investigative hypothesis. I would not bring that to the suspect. What I would bring to them is ask them to explain to me what happened from the minute the child was born. How was the birth? What happened to you? Your physical signs were happening to you? That kind of thing. And then that story could come out naturally. And then I would ask probing questions. Okay, I was cleaning myself up. The baby was born, whatever. And I wrapped the baby in the towel, and then I realized the baby was deceased or whatever. And then I didn't know what to do, right? So you'd progress the story by asking a couple of probing questions without leading, and then let that person speak back to you and kind of give you the correct details. Because people, like I said, they're not masterminds. They might come up with a story that they're going to tell, but in a proper interview kind of a setting, using all these emotions, understanding who the person is, it's going to tell you how to ask the right questions to get to the truth of the story. And when we get to the truth, people don't always just, okay, here's the whole truth. They might tell you a grain of truth and skip a bunch of other stuff. And then the whole idea for the investigator is to listen to that truth, compare it to what you know is the facts, and then go back and ask another question and try and get another little piece of truth, till eventually there is very often a point in an interview, especially with something emotional like this, where the person may just physically break down. They can't withhold it anymore, and then they just tell you the whole story. But there's a lot there I'd be looking at. So you're right about that towel. That towel, I think, is important, but I think it is connected to the birth process. And then I would hope there was decency in her to say, it's a little baby. Let me wrap it up before I put it in the bag, because just putting it in the bag says something completely different to me.
Yeah, I think sadly, as we're having the discussion, because guys, by the way, me and Joe really haven't talked about this. We just study it independently and build our discussion. I just see it kind of as I don't want to see it. Basically, she just swept it up as it was garbage, just like everything else, and put it into the garbage bag. And the towel was the cleanup. So just I'll hide it in there because it's part of the mess and dump it in. And I want to mention something about the shame. So we talked about shame. Actually, could be more about you, about what you've done, how it affects, how you're seen. So at some level, shame actually could be just embarrassment. So think about that as a lesser scale, because shame could be, I'm ashamed of what I've done. Why? Because how it affected the baby. And maybe that's still superficial, but maybe. But I think embarrassment is totally selfish. So when you get caught and this is what you've done, you put the baby in this bag. I don't think they have the depth to even feel shame. I think it's so superficial for someone like this that they don't even feel shame. They feel embarrassment because it attacks straight to who they are, straight to how they want people to see them. So I thought that was interesting. So, Joe, I got, let's see, I got the psychological denial, pregnancy denial syndrome, believe it or not. This is legit. It sort of follows, we discussed this with the mental health counselor I had on. It kind of follows like any denial phase. You get given some shocking news. You deny it first until you go through the levels of acceptance. So, denial, angry, whatever it is, all the way down to acceptance. So you got a dissociative state where the person refuses to acknowledge pregnancy, no prenatal care because they're emotionally disconnected from reality. And that may explain why she continued life as normal until birth. So we're talking about now, this is her mental mindset. Could be. We don't know, but we're going to try this angle out. So does this case reflect a deeper mental health crisis rather than criminal thinking? So, Joe, when investigators encounter a suspect claiming, I didn't know I was pregnant, what steps are taken to test that claim? And how do police verify if it's denial or deception?
Okay. So in true denial, when people deny this, you got to understand psychologically, why would you deny something? A different kind of a case. Your company is falling apart and you can tell that they're going to close down and you're going to be out of a job. You can't support your family. What do? What do people do? Do they immediately go and look for another job? Some people do. Other people say, well, maybe it'll get better. And other people just say, nah, that's not going to happen. And they put it out of their mind. This kind of a thing with a baby, and because we have seen this before, the fact that there is a psychological name for this tells you that this is real and it does happen. So we don't know the background of her family, their religious background, the pressure that would have been on her not to have premarital sex, then to get pregnant, then the guy is not around. All those pressures can come to bear on top of all the other things that you mentioned earlier, ruining her position, her status. What am I going to do about this? That can lead to a maelstrom of thoughts in somebody's head. And again, when we look from the outside in, we say, how can that possibly be? That's ridiculous. Sometimes I think there are varying levels of the denial. Well, something might be up, but I'm not pregnant. I can't be pregnant, right? We used a condom, whatever. Or if I think about it, then I have to deal with it. So I know I'm not pregnant. No, I'm not. And they put it out of their mind. People do horrible things and then they put it out of their mind because it's too much to consider. It's too much to think about. There's too much stress involved around it. Can that indicate a bigger psychological problem? Of course it can. If you or I had some kind of a situation, how many people don't go to the doctor because they're afraid they might have something? So if I just don't go to the doctor, I don't have to find out I got something. Next thing you know, they got stage 4, whatever. Well, they should have went when they had a couple of symptoms, but you know what? Out of sight, out of mind. We see people do that all the time. Well, I kind of felt some things, but if I go to a doctor, then they're going to start giving me tests and I'm going to find out all this stuff. So it opens up a whole change in their reality if they look at it and say, yes, I am pregnant. She could have been not going to the doctor because she thought she was going to end the pregnancy and just couldn't get around to doing it.
You just got, Joe, you just got on what I was going to ask you. You know how I'm very afraid of going to doctors, but I'll start getting my regulars in. But with that said, sometimes it's because you're right. You don't want to be diagnosed with something. You think, oh my God, I may have this and let me avoid it because out of sight, out of mind. But you figure if you do think you're pregnant, you know there's an end result. You're going to have to give birth to a baby. So I think at one point there becomes a belief where it cannot be avoided. Right? So would that compel you now, or would you just try to weigh it out? Because you said it at the very end, I'll take care of it when it comes.
Right. I think those are distinct possibilities. And again, we start to, and this is hypothetical because we're not talking to this girl. We're not looking at the evidence. We're looking at what it looks like. So you could say, okay, she might have had denial. Okay, I am pregnant, but I'm going to get an abortion. And then she couldn't get there. And next thing you know, she could have been 3 weeks early delivering a baby. It could have been a preemie. It could have been 6 weeks early. Next thing you know,
Joe, I got to ask you something because you're hitting something. I want to ask something. So obviously in Kentucky, they don't have the right to have an abortion. So I don't know if that played into it. But Joe, let me ask you a question though. So I like where you're going here. So if I deny that I'm pregnant, even up until when I give birth, I get rid of the baby, I'm able to walk away because I could deny the baby ever existed. So It doesn't just, it's not even about even giving birth. I'm still going to finish that denial out. And it's funny because they really should give a name to the baby at this point, because I feel like it is a life. It did have, it's a life regardless. And we keep on calling it baby but having said that, you can deny it even after the baby was born, which I do see. I see her shoving the baby in the back of a closet in a garbage bag, in a dirty towel. And in my mind, she walked out and did her thing because in her mind, she denied that even happened.
Right. I think there's a reality for some people. And again, for all of us here listening to this, putting ourselves in these positions, you say, there's no way somebody would think like that. Well, I got to tell you, I've dealt with sociopaths, psychopaths, normal, regular people who have done horrible things intentionally, or things got out of hand, and how they deal with all of that stress is different for every person. So you're right. She could have had that denial right up. And again, like I was saying, the baby could be 6 weeks early. She thought she had another 6 weeks before she'd have to, the boyfriend's going to take her to Mississippi or wherever where she can get an abortion. And now she's giving birth to the baby. And that can be so overwhelming, I would think, psychologically. What do I do now? And again, we need to know the condition of the baby at birth and how did the baby die. That will tell us a lot about the actions right after the birth. And then that can lead to understanding her mindset and whether she had culpability for crime, or was the baby born stillborn from all that jumping around and exercising she does? Was the baby already gone? We're not going to know that, but I think that denial can be maintained right to that point. The ones that I've dealt with, that's what they did. They had the baby. Nobody saw the baby. So they wrap the baby up and they throw the baby in a garbage can. Happens all the time, because then it's over and it's gone. The baby's not there. I'm not pregnant anymore. I got away with what I needed to get away with. Now, and the words get away, words mean things, right? So you get away with can mean I got away with my criminal culpability. I did something to this baby purposely to kill it. Or I got away with nobody knowing. My parents don't know. My church doesn't know. The boyfriend doesn't know. The school doesn't know. The team doesn't know. It's just over, and put it out of my mind, right? These are very, very powerful emotions that lead us to do things. Human beings are so unique in this emotional world that controls the psychology that we deal with, how we deal with things, and the things that we physically do. I ask all my students, I say, if I said to you, joy, happiness, love, kindness, those are good emotions, right? Usually people don't get hurt when we're feeling those things. Jealousy, betrayal, anger, hatred, fear, those kind of things usually lead to people getting hurt one way or another. And it's because we have all these human emotions that they certainly drive us. And if you have someone who has a mental condition, diagnosed or undiagnosed, they have some other situation going on, they have other stresses, putting yourself in someone else's shoes is very hard to do from, outside. But once you get down with that person and you have all of this, that's where the investigator can start piecing this all together and try and work their way through it to find out what really happened and why.
I got a thought. I'm very empathetic. I mean, that's why I write my books. I mean, manipulation decoded, books like that, because I I really try to get into the heads of the people that do it and the people that are on the other end of it receiving it. So now, if I'm gonna stay with the vanity, but I'm gonna put a little twist to it because something just come to my mind. Okay, so I believe this could have been about her image, right? So hypothetically, she's got a lot of things going for her. She didn't need this obstacle. Let's say this is an avenue. We don't know for a fact, but we'll find out eventually. So even the relationship is still about vanity. The star sports player, it's the perfect couple. Star sports player with the cheerleader. I mean, it makes sense with maybe what she's looking for. So her thing right now is maintaining the relationship for very superficial reasons, because if love is deep, and love, it grows from struggle, from finding ways to work together to get through the obstacles of life. So to be honest with you, if me and my wife were young and I loved her and we she wind up having a kid, our love could be strengthened by the child because we're both battling the same concern, which ultimately could put us closer together, as long as we are open to being there and knowing the child is a gift that, the child's a gift, not a burden. That's one thing. But here's the funny thing, and the reason why I'm bringing this, I'm thinking of it out loud, was still sake of vanity. Because remember, my case here, the relationship could be more superficial. If she was with this guy, Connor Jordan, whatever, two first names, maintaining the relationship could be more about the facade of a star player with a star cheerleader. So maybe I'll be the hero and I'll take the baby out. And this way, no one will ever know of it. Even if he knew, because he did erase all his social media. I mean, that's a little unique to me. I think that he also could be concerned about his image. And when she started getting found out, maybe he erased all his connection to her because he didn't want to be connected and lose his scholarship because she made a choice. Or he could have been involved in somewhat of the cover-up. Who knows? Maybe they took these pictures and decided later on, I just got a deal. You just got a deal. We can't have this kid. And then now the context changes and she's under this pressure because at one point she wants the kid, or it looks like she wants the kid. So you're going to look at social media and say, hey, was this for now, or was this for a day in the future, or what's going on here? Because at one point it looked like you wanted this, you're welcoming it, and at one point you didn't. Where's the conflict? What was the catalyst? What was the change? So I think it could also be a point where maintaining the relationship with her, and let's say this boy, if this is even, that's why it's very important to find out who the father is and the dynamics of this relationship. Were they together? Were they breaking up? What's going on here with this relationship? Because that could be a catalyst. But in her mind, maybe doing that, she's the hero. She preserves the relationship, and they go back to their superficial facade of the perfect life. Now, granted, I could be off, but I think it's 100% within the context. It makes sense to have that type of perspective because she basically tosses it in a trash bag, right? Clean up all that stuff in the back of a closet. Let's forget about it. Let me live my life. And then one day maybe I'll call hey, I took care of it. Right. It'll be interesting to see who she spoke to after she gave birth. I'm assuming the first call would be very important. But again, Joe, I don't think I'm not saying this happened, but I don't think I'm that far out and thinking it in the
Anthony, I don't think you are. You have a legitimate investigative hypothesis. You have a legitimate thing that has got to be looked at. As investigators, if we say, well, I know what happened, and we stick just with that, we miss things. And we've seen it happen all the time in investigations. So your theory is legitimate. That could be true. How many times do we see these kind of things happen? Scott Peterson, his wife is pregnant. He's got a girlfriend. He tells her, oh, my wife died, because he doesn't want that relationship. So he kills the wife and the baby, while she's pregnant. Susan Smith drove her children into a lake and killed them because the boyfriend she was with didn't want children. So she wanted to get rid of them. This is not unheard of. Children, like you said, if you and your wife get together and you're in love with each other, a baby is a blessing. It helps cement a relationship. Having a baby can also destroy a relationship. It can cause problems. Well, you know what? I'm watching on social media here every day. I'm seeing all these things as I look out into the world. What are people doing? Oh, these girls, I'm a single mother and these guys won't date me because I have kids, because they don't want to step into a whole family, have to take care of children. This is a reality that we have. Children, for you and me, we don't see them as a burden because we're in love with our partners, and we see that as an add-on. That's more to our relationship, where other people, especially if you're young and you have this whole world in front of you that's nothing but likes, and you have great opportunities that are just about you or you and him, and now this baby is going to impede that, then that's absolutely a legitimate thing to look at. Matter of fact, when I look at that, my questions come to, we covered the towel and the bag. My questions come to, as far as trying to figure out what the real motive here was. Why not get the abortion? Was that part of the plan? Was it baby come too early and they couldn't, and that plans changed? Was this a situation where it just happened? She was in denial and now she has the kid and that's going to ruin everything. So she took action. She did something. Did the baby, she really didn't think she was pregnant and suddenly she's given birth and she doesn't know what to do? All of that's going to make a difference in whether or not there's a criminal culpability. Now, no doubt about it, leaving a dead baby in a closet is not treating a corpse correctly. And as cold as that is to say, that's the reality. So is she guilty of that? I think pretty clearly. If the baby was still alive when she left it in the plastic bag, now you have homicide. But if the baby was already deceased by whatever means, stillborn, died in birth, whatever, and she put it in that bag, she didn't handle the body correctly. So all of these things are going to make a huge difference down the road to understand, who, what, when, where, how, and why. Those are the questions we have to answer. But your theory is absolutely legitimate. And that's something an investigator has got to look at. Is that who this person was? Or was there another set of circumstances that were at play here that we might not be able to fathom, but are just as legitimate? And you only find that out by looking at evidence, people, places, scenes, that kind of thing.
Well, you know what, Joe? So as we focused on denial, and could it be deception or denial? And then there's the other thing which I had here was maybe she didn't know she was pregnant. So you got rare, but some women don't recognize signs, minimal weight gain, irregular periods, or misreading symptoms, active lifestyles like athletes. Athletes may suppress outward signs, and this would imply no intent, no plan, just shock. So could ignorance, not intent, explain everything? And it's funny because we're asking these questions because this would relate to her seeking medical or not, and then premeditation. But then obviously after she gives birth, we know that she made the effort to clean up and conceal. So I'm going to ask you two questions, Joe, because one question I already had written down, but there's another question I want to add based on what you said. So the one question I have written down, just kind of hold in the back of your head, is have you seen credible cases where someone truly didn't know they were pregnant, and what evidence or interviews help detectives decide if that's believable? Now hold that thought though, because it's something else that I want to ask you too in the process. So we're focused on a lot of premeditation, right? So we're trying to see, okay, maybe these are the reasons she wouldn't get a doctor's appointment, because if these reasons aren't suffice, then you could maybe make an assumption that, hey, she never really planned on carrying this baby the distance anyway. Because if she did, where were the appointments? And then at that point, maybe she didn't want people to know. So now you start to see that maybe there is some deception or secrecy. So if I was the defense, I would quickly say she was in denial, pull some mental health issue, or she just didn't know. And there is a difference. Denial could be mental health concerns, a shock that you just don't overcome. And then, not knowing you're pregnant is not mental health. You just don't know. But you still have the fact that she covered it up, concealed, maybe negligent, or could have killed the baby. We don't know yet. But let's treat it as if it's a stillborn. And she gave birth at the house. Maybe she didn't even know she was giving birth, but she finally gave birth. Then she leaves the house with the baby in the back of a closet. What would weigh more heavily if I couldn't get the premeditation? Because that's what they're looking for. But let's say we do find out it looks like she did kill the baby. But obviously, could she have been under mental stress? I mean, all this stuff is going to be tossed out by the defense, right? Is the act to clean it up just as powerful as premeditation?
Yes, that shows consciousness of action, that somebody cleaned up, that she didn't in the middle of this call her 911 for herself, or call a girlfriend, or call somebody and say, hey, I didn't know I was pregnant, but something's happening to me. I think there's a baby being born here. I'm bleeding, whatever it might have been. The act of actually cleaning it up, putting it in a bag, and then leaving without telling anyone. To me, you can say, and again, this is where we go down the road with this. You know, you can have denial, you can have legitimate mental health, you can have all these other things. The actions after that baby is born will speak to her. And if you break them down, what killed the child? Was the child stillborn? That makes it, there's no homicide if the child is stillborn. But then there's other things. So when I look at that, I say, I think my decisions would come down to trying to understand what she did in those moments. What did she know? How did she react to it? And all of that's going to tell us forensically mostly.
All right. And then, Joe, does that touch on, I think that touched on, right? Have you ever seen credible cases where someone truly didn't know they were pregnant, and what evidence or interviews helped detectives decide if that was even believable? So that's different than denial, because as I said, I think denial is more mental health. This is more, did the person know or not?
Right. Yes, I have seen cases where young girls were pregnant and didn't realize it. Most of the time, they are very young girls. They are immature. They are not familiar with their own bodies, how their body functions. Might be very early in their menstrual cycles that they ended up getting pregnant, whether it was a family member did something to them, or they did something with a boyfriend and they didn't know what they were doing, or they didn't realize, all these myths that kids have. Oh, you can't get pregnant from doing this and doing that. You can get pregnant lots of ways. All right. That stuff moves around pretty quick. So I've seen it with younger girls, especially, and more, a little bit older teen girls, who are, again, very immature, really not connected to sexuality in any way. And then they get involved in something, or someone takes advantage of them, and they have no idea how their body is supposed to be functioning. Not everybody puts on 60, 70 pounds with a baby. Some women, you look at them and you go, you're how much? 7 months pregnant? And then they give birth, and then 3 weeks later, they look like they're ready to go back to the gym. So I have seen it, yes, to answer your question, where they honestly did not know they were pregnant until they gave birth. They didn't know what was happening to them. And then all of a sudden, here comes this baby. And the parents find out because the kid's in the bathroom and screaming for help, or they're bleeding, and they call mom, I'm bleeding, what's going on? Or a little bit older girls who just don't have a lot of life experience, not a lot of sex experience, or experience with their bodies and how they feel. Once you go beyond that and you get into adult women, have I heard of adult women that didn't realize they were pregnant? Now, you might say, and this is not to insult anybody, but you might get a woman who is a heavier set and puts on 8 or 10 pounds, but she's already 70, 80, or 90 pounds overweight. She might not notice that 10 pounds. Depends on how her body feels, her cycles, how they go. Are they complicated? Are they not? Might not realize till they're further down the road that they're actually pregnant. And in those cases, not necessarily any kind of an intent to not have the baby or kill the baby or whatever, just didn't realize that they were pregnant because they didn't feel the same symptoms that we would all think would be normal. I've heard about those. And you say, wow, you would think you got something growing inside you. We all have felt, even as fathers, right? We see that baby kicking. We like to feel the belly, and there's the baby kicking. Oh my God. My wife would tell me, I could feel the kid kicking. I could feel him kicking. He's kicking, right? Do they not know what that feeling is? Do they not understand it? Maybe it was a quieter baby. I don't know. But in the cases that I've seen where it's credible, they're usually younger or inexperienced teens.
Yeah, and it's funny. I know you mentioned the prom girl before, so I'm very familiar with that case because when I started corrections, I worked at a female facility, and I came into corrections around 2002. So I was in the system at the end of her sentence, sort of, and she wasn't giving a long sentence. I want people to know that. She was given a very short sentence. A lot of people thought it was a political connect. I really don't know. But the big thing is she was a bigger girl. I remember her perfectly well. She was a bigger girl, and she gave birth in the bathroom, and then she left with the baby, I think still in the bath, whatever she did. She got rid of the baby, but the point is she went right back out on the dance floor. But there were arguments that she didn't even know she was pregnant, that she thought she had a stomach ache or something, and turned out she gave birth to a baby. But having said that, I do remember that case because I had came into the system and I did have a brief interaction or two, but then she left soon after. She was not given a big sentence, even though it did make, I think it went past local news. I think that was a pretty big case. I forget, but I don't know. When you work in a prison system, you see a lot of cases, and they make big news, but sometimes it all just blurs together. But I think her case was beyond local news. I had something else I wanted to add, but I think we can go right to the last section because I put avoidance and control, but I don't think it really plays out here. So I don't even want to explore that. We'll save that for another day. I just don't think it plays into this case after we'll see. Me and Joe kind of, I send Joe where I think the discussions are going to kind of fall into, and then Joe will develop his perspective. I develop mine. But as I got into further discussion with Joe, I don't think that part of this discussion plays out. So I don't want to make the dialogue any more confusing than it has to be. So which means that we're coming down to our last section. And then I have a few questions I'm going to toss to the audience to answer. But if you want to answer any one of those, Joe, let me know. I'm just going to toss some out to the audience at the end of the show to try to get their involvement as well, because I'm learning a lot from them as well. And guys, if you get the information, keep me updated, because me and Joe will keep on providing updates. But right now, this is one of the cases I'm working on. I'm also working on, so just, if you have updates, the Emmanuel Harrow case, and kind of stepping away from Kohlberger. That's done. Everybody right now is kind of it's just too much with him. So right now we're just more focused on Emmanuel Harrow, this case here. And also I did the Ding Dong Ditch, which was a very good episode that me, Russ Hamilton, and Joe Paponio explored, and we covered a lot. So we may follow up on that one. And I did something a while ago on McGadden. That was the case in Arkansas. It was where he killed the parents and left the kids alive during some hike. But there really wasn't much with that. So I put our thoughts out there, but I don't know if I'm going to revisit that. But in the meantime, the cases we're looking to touch on more would be this case, because we're very connected to this. And then also the Emmanuel Harrow case is probably my priority right now. I'm going to let you know. So if you guys get updates, send them my way, please, because if I can get any break to discuss, I would like to do that. The last part I have here, Joe, is going to be about legal and forensic relevance. I like to always add these in there. So prosecution, no prenatal care could equal evidence that she never intended to keep the baby alive. That's kind of what we were talking about. And the defense would be, well, you got fear, shame, denial, or lack of awareness. We wanted to put that out there. So that obviously says not intent. So basically, no, she didn't know she was pregnant, or she denied she was pregnant, so she had mental health concerns, or maybe out of fear or shame, she didn't go to the doctor. I mean, it's going to be all these excuses not to document the prenatal care, to minimize any type of premeditation that you knew you were pregnant. And this thing you did all the way to the birth and putting the baby in the closet in a garbage bag was all planned out from the very beginning. Well, how do you know? Because you never went once to the doctor. And that would be, I think, a good argument for the prosecutor. But the defense could give many reasons why you don't go to the doctor. So I think a big part of the argument would be on the back end. Hey, you gave birth, you put the baby in a trash bag, put it in the closet. What's going on here? So this detail will be pivotal in how the jury interprets her state of mind. So, Joe, sort of the last question. We'll see how we go with the generalized discussion questions. But how do detectives frame the no prenatal care issue for prosecutors as a potential indicator of intent? And what weight do you think juries give to that fact that this was to go to trial?
Well, I think when you're talking about a case like this, and you mentioned, the prom mom didn't get a big sentence. The reason that people don't usually get a big sentence like this is because these are very emotional issues. They involve people that can come across as very vulnerable. They look like people can put themselves, gee, if that was me and I didn't know what to do. And so that's why understanding why this happened. Was it a purposeful thing? Was it denial? Was it mental health? Was it something else? Is going to be important. So when people look at these things, when you're looking to understand it, your interview with the person, the forensics evidence is going to match up what they're telling you, because that's really the key. You can't make up forensics evidence. What happened, happened. But that is all going to be framed as a prosecution. I would, if I had enough in my case to say she knew she was pregnant right away. We talked to these 3 girls who said in month number 2 of her pregnancy, she said, I think I'm pregnant. I'm scared to death. What am I going to do? I'm not going to have the baby. And you have those statements from 2 different people. That starts to look like, well, she knew. Why didn't she go to the doctor then? Well, she didn't go because she didn't want to have a trail, a paper trail. Maybe she was considering ending it sooner. Maybe she was going to have an abortion as she got further along. Going to a doctor when you're in college, it's one thing, I think, to go to the infirmary because you got the flu, but to go to an OBGYN because you're pregnant, that costs money. Right? Who do you have to tell? You have to say to mom and dad, I'm going to use my insurance because I'm pregnant. Right? So that opens up that whole can of worms. So maybe that's why she didn't do any of that. If it looks to me, based on the end result of the investigation, that she planned this all along to end this pregnancy, just couldn't get to it. And then once she had the baby, did something to kill the baby, to end the whole drama. I would go back, and you certainly could make a case that that's where this was leading to. She didn't go because she knew she was going to abort the baby, or she was going to terminate the pregnancy herself once the baby was born. That is a huge step for someone to go through. I'm going to carry this baby to term and then kill it when it's born. That's why these sentences come out very hard. You might find out that she did do something to the baby once it was born. We do see these young girls drown the baby if they have the baby near the toilet. They do smother the babies. They do things that take the life of the baby. You start to look at that. You say, why would you wait so long to have the baby, to plan? I'm gonna go 9 months. I'm going to have a baby bump. It's going to affect everything I do in my life, could affect my boyfriend. And at the end, I'll just kill it and get rid of it. That is a big leap to say someone did it. This speaks more to me of someone who went along and maybe had some different ideas of how this was going to go, didn't know what else to do, and ended up rolling with it. And like I said, the baby could have been born 6 weeks early, could have been a preemie, could have been full term, who knows? But now the baby's there. What she does next is going to determine, from the investigator prosecutor point of view, what do you do? The minute that baby is born, and it's born alive and it's healthy, she has a responsibility to that child. It is now considered in the eyes of the law across the nation as a human being. It is a person now that is outside the mother. It's not something, well, you talk about Virginia, that's separate, the law they wanted to have, but we don't have that. If she did anything at that point, prevailed to provide care for that child, that goes into neglect. Now she put the baby in a towel and put it in the closet and left it there, and it died in several hours from lack of care. That is a neglect. And you can look at that as a homicide. She's responsible. Is it manslaughter? Is she responsible for the death? Did she smother the child? Did she do anything else to the child to take its life, to stop it? That's going to make a difference. Going back and saying she went the whole time with the plan in her mind to, well, when the baby's born, I'll choke it to death. That does not seem reasonable for someone to go through all of that. So it would seem to me you're looking more of a situation where she really didn't know, or she was in denial, or she knew and panicked at the last minute and did something, or it was stillborn and she panicked and didn't know what to do. I think it's really going to come down to those two things prosecutorially, because how do you make that case to a jury? Juries are very sympathetic to people sometimes when things like this happen, especially if she makes that story. I knew, but I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. Yeah, she might be found guilty of something if the cause and manner of death is homicide, because she did something or failed to do something that the baby needed once it was born. There could be charges and there could be penalties. But if we look at it the other way and it was stillborn, then it's the other charges jump up in there, failing to, dispose of a corpse the proper way, failed to call for help, whatever else they charged her with. As an investigator and a prosecutor, that is, I think, becomes the challenge for charging these kind of cases. It's one thing to charge two people get into a fist fight. I pull a gun and purposely shoot you and kill you, and there's 9 witnesses. well, I'm wrong all the way across the board. I'm going to be found guilty of homicide. It's really going to blur the lines unless the investigation reveals she knew she was pregnant. She made some kind of statements that, you know what, when I have the baby, I'll just get rid of it. All right. Now you have a whole different can of worms. And is that possible? Yes, it is possible. Going with your theory, it's absolutely possible that that's what her plan was. People are not expert criminals. They come up with stupid ideas, stupid plans. But that's how you look at it as an investigator. You don't always worry how the jury's going to see it, but you have to be concerned of how the jury's going to see it. And you have to address some of these things as part of your prosecution.
Yeah, and my mind always, same as yours, Joe. I build on what you say, and then I always get these other questions that come to mind. And you know what? At the end of this episode, as we wrap up, I'm actually okay with not making it as complex as, the last episode we did really involved the mental health counsel, and we really dug in deep with feelings and being pressured and how it could affect somebody outside of also giving onus too. We covered a lot. But this episode, the fact that she immediately walked away from it after concealing the baby, put the baby in the back of a closet. I mean, this is pure intent to hide the baby. So it's not even about denial of pregnancy, rather the denial of the baby's existence in general. I think that's where the greater concern is, that I would like to go deep and try to give this person some benefit of the doubt. I just don't think she is that deep. I think this is just very superficial based on being a superficial person. So the choices that she made were pretty much surface choices. How do I best protect my image? By denying the baby ever existed. Because I was going to go into some depth about maybe she believed in not having abortions, but now she's fought with the reality of maybe not wanting a baby. Now, how does that sink in? And I would be making it too complex for a person who may not even be that deep. Doesn't mean those discussions wouldn't exist in another platform or another concern, but just not for this one. Right. So I have 5 questions I want to toss out to the audience. 4, I think me and Joe covered deeply, but number 5, no, I think actually we covered these all, Joe. But if you feel that there's something else we can add, we'll add. If not, we'll wrap it up and then wait for the next update, and we'll see where we go from there. But for the audience, based on what we discussed, what's your thoughts on, does avoiding prenatal care automatically suggest intent? I think me and Joe covered that. What role might shame and fear play in concealing a pregnancy? We covered that. I think it's more internal about how you're viewed, and Joe thought the same. Is not knowing you're pregnant a reasonable defense in a courtroom? We talked about that. How should courts handle psychological denial in cases with tragic outcomes? Interesting, generalized, but related to this in context. And from an investigative angle, what signs help separate premeditation from panic? And I thought that was a unique question, because we were covering that in the show with the mental health counselor, but the fact is, my biggest thing is the prenatal, not getting the prenatal care provides a context that I think that even, it's funny because you could focus on what happened before, but even if they say, well, before doesn't provide enough clarity, but what she did after provides the clarity. That's the unique thing. I think what she did after she gave birth is what could define what she did before, and not the other way around. Does that make sense, Joe? Is that something you're familiar with, where you?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And that's why understanding exactly what happened here is going to shed light on what she did and why she did it, and the culpability for what she may or may not have for what she did or didn't do before the birth of that child. At the moment of birth, when that child is born, if it's alive, whatever happened next is where everyone's going to focus.
And Joe, I want to mention, Laken, I don't know if you're ever going to watch this. I'm sure you're probably looking up things right now. We may pop up on your feed. It's not an attack, because I try to be objective in the last thing, but that new discovery of you walking away and then coming back, there's no other light that you can see that in. And if there's something else that, you may want to add, we're always open to the dialogue. Obviously, you're not going to be talking to anybody at this point. I wouldn't expect you to. But I don't want to go out here and just, me and Joe are not out to paint a negative picture. We're out to paint an objective perspective. There's just no other way. I mean, give ourselves a minute right now. Joe, let's be fair. I really can't, but let's be fair. Is there any other way that you could justify the birth, the cleanup, the towel, the garbage bag, back a closet, and then go and live in your life for a few hours, and then coming back and just in shock that someone may have called the police on the dead body that you, the dead baby that you put in the closet? I mean, I can't think of any. I can't justify that.
That's inhuman to do that. That is, regardless of, it was her mental state, it was her fear, it was her panic, it was whatever. There's no excuse for an adult woman, even a young woman like this, if this baby was born alive, to not be concerned and take care of that baby. I find no excuse for that. Can I understand that there could have been factors that led to the decision she made? Sure. Would those be mitigating factors in the punishment? They could be. That's how our courts work. But for me personally, if that baby was born alive, no matter what happened up until that moment, what you thought, what you were afraid of, who you were ashamed of, whatever, that baby's alive and you're an adult and you have a responsibility. Beyond the fact that it's a person, it's your baby. You have a responsibility to do something to protect that baby at the cost of your opportunities, at the cost of your embarrassment, at the cost of everything. That baby is now alive. It is totally vulnerable. And as people of decency, we have to take care of that baby, no matter what it means to how it affects our lives.
And for me and Joe, not to be able to go a layer deep on that, not even one layer deep, it's because the action is so superficial. We could only find excuses, not justifications. And we're not here to give people excuses. I just cannot justify that action. Oh, I didn't know what to do. Well, what were you looking to do? Because that's the funny thing too, because it obviously had nothing to do with taking care of the baby. Your only concern was, I didn't know what to do to protect your image or your image of whatever it is that you're trying to maintain relationship-wise, whatnot. Hey, Joe, anything you'd like to say in closing? Where can we find you once again? And Joe, I'm going to be bothering you. Don't get mad.
No, I love coming on.
You do. I may be hitting you up every time I find something. I have my crew. You, Russ, Joe Paponio, Gary. I have a few people, but you are one of the people I go to. One, because your information is excellent. So that's the benefit of it all. So that's the main thing. But there is a second thing that helps out as well, because the second thing is you're always available at this time. So I got the bonus of just this excellent guest. And then obviously your availability. And then Joe is also working on his own true crime podcast, which I'm sure he can explain a little bit more. So these dialogues do help. He's more than welcome to utilize these dialogues on his platform. But this also gives Joe some momentum and just to start creating his own thing and educating the viewers on things they need to know, because they don't know they need to know. And in the process, we get educated ourselves by the viewers and teaching us things about the cases that we may not realize because we just don't have access to information like other people may have. So I have to really trust in what's already out there. Hey, Joe, anything in closing, brother?
Sure. I would like to say, you see the Blue Heart podcast, you will find on YouTube, if you go there. On YouTube, I call it the Blue Heart Webcast. All right. So you can go www.youtube.com/@Blue Heart Webcast. And I have lots of shows on there. I have a segment that I do with my daughter, who's a brilliant young woman, and she loves true crime and crime investigation. And we have a segment we call Murder and Mayhem, where we talk about criminal cases and cases in the news, cases that I've experienced, and we talk them out about how things are done. My books, I have, you can see over here, The Interview, and I also have The Investigation, two really good books to help you understand how to conduct criminal investigations. And you get them all from blue360media.com, or you can go on Amazon and find me there. So I appreciate being here. I appreciate Anthony letting me talk to you, his audience. I hope we all learn something together here. For those of you who are investigators that are out there, we have a huge responsibility. What I teach my students is that when you're the investigator and there's a crime and it comes before you, you might be the only person that can bring justice for the victim, whether it's a living victim or a dead victim, like a little baby in a closet. You might be the only person that can bring that justice. And therefore, you got to know everything you got to know. You got to have experience. You got to listen to people that know what they've done. And then you have to go out and do the job. So, Anthony, thank you so much for having me on here. I really appreciate it.
Hey, yeah, of course. Hey, Joe, what about you and your daughter coming on one time, maybe in the near future for an update? We could always Zoom her in.
Sure, absolutely.
I think the audience, once you recommend that, the audience is going to want to see her.
Well, she's a beautiful young woman, and she's brilliant. Marisa Joy is her name, and she's an actress, and she's a marketing person, and she is a writer. She's just absolutely brilliant. So Murder and Mayhem is what we do. Because she likes that stuff so much. So I'll absolutely have her on if you'd like.
Yeah. Hey, Joe, if she's anything like you, it'd be a blessing to the channel. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. We'll come up with more. If you guys got some cases, recommend, send it our way. But as I said, I really try to follow just a few because this is hard, man. You know, you do something and 5 minutes later, there's an update. And so we try to cover things from multiple perspectives because if there is an update, I think we may have covered that unless it's so far off that we feel that we have to go back up. You put up something and 5 minutes later, and we're not doing clickbait either. That's a whole nother thing. You know, I clicked onto a show where Rebecca was the one that did it, and the whole time this person's talking about just a theory of his. Well, that's clickbait because it didn't look like that when you go to click in. Then he's like, oh, I just want to tell you a theory of why I think she did it. No. You know, everybody's going to think that you know something we don't know. And next thing you know, you got people running on false information. The channel here is just to provide people with insight, but we provide so many different perspectives so you guys can discern and see what fits. And guys, here's the last thing. This doesn't just apply for this case. We're talking about human emotion, just the challenges of being human. So whatever we do here could easily apply elsewhere. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. Stay safe. All right, John.